He's an author of many well-cited articles and books on marketing theory, sustainable marketing, and relationship marketing. Wiley India recently published his latest book on marketing theory. After his PhD, Atul dedicated 15 years of his career to entrepreneurship, has a very refreshing perspective on the managerial implications of the research we're doing in sustainable marketing, and historically has done some of the more fascinating work on relationship marketing. Among them, the relationship marketing article published in the Journal of the Academy of Marketing Sciences, as well as the evolution of relationship marketing in the International Business Review. Most recently, he's published in the Journal of Macro Marketing, an article titled Socially Responsible Marketing, and a JBR called Strategic Solutions for Climate Change Social Dilemma. So please join me in welcoming Atul Parvatiyar.
Thank you very much, Bob. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I am really honored to be on this stellar panel of experts, and thank you very much for inviting me, Dana and team. And it's been an excellent conference. So I'm going to limit myself to a few comments related to the deep problem of consumption. I might make some controversial statements as well, but I'll also echo many things that other speakers have said, particularly what Sandra and Kate were talking about. So let me dwell straight away into what I call as the deep and acute problem of consumption. Intentional cultivation of decades of consumerism, materialism, affluence, hedonism, fueled by the massive advertising. In fact, last year, we spent $880 billion in advertising, has created an unsustainable consumption culture. We all know this. And at the same time, consumers are engaged in excessive and harmful consumption that profoundly impact both human health and social cost. And to some extent, or I would say to a large extent, and very controversial, and I'm consciously saying this, marketing is responsible for creating the crass elevation of material acquisition to the status of dominant social paradigm. Beyond environmental and biophysical considerations, consumption issues also transcend community, work, meaning, freedom, and overall quality of life. And many of these top-down measures, such as the technology-led efficient product solutions or nudging strategies that behavioral scientists would like to apply, have all fallen short of the compounding rate of the problem. Lots of researchers in engineering and others have shown that the rate at which the compounding problem is happening is far greater than whatever we are saving on the eco products. And we all know that the world population with 8 billion already achieved, and last 1 billion, as you know, just got added in the last 12 years, that rate of population growth is going to further compound the problem. So we got to confront this wicked problem of consumption. And how do we confront this wicked problem of consumption? At least I can, let me venture to say, more of the same rhetoric, action or inaction will not reverse the trend. And also tinkering at the margins of production processes or purchase behavior will not make the society sustainable. We've got to change and challenge several ideas. One of the ideas that consumption is the process of economy, or the purpose of the economy, has got to be challenged. It means that we've got to decouple, as what Sandra was saying, decouple marketing from growth economics and avoid the more is better trap. This whole trap that we are in, which is all related to growth in terms of volume, growth in terms of product, we got to kind of decouple ourselves from that. Marketing has to focus, and I know CV is going to talk a lot more about that in terms of the purpose of marketing. We got to rethink marketing theories and practices that promote excessive consumption as well as waste. For example, bundling of products is one of the ways in which what we try to do is try and create more excessive consumption. Or for example, people talk about food waste. And think about food waste. A lot of food waste happens in restaurants, etc., because we created the buffet system. That's where most of the food waste takes place. So a lot of things that we created in marketing may be things that we need to probably undo. Otherwise, we will constantly be promoting the same excessive consumption. So we probably from a research perspective, we need to determine, number one, what theories and practice of marketing have inadvertently cultivated materialism and consumerism. And we got to reform theories. Otherwise, our discipline will lose its relevance. So I'm making this very bold statement to say, we got to go back and recheck our theories ourselves and say which theories are the ones that is responsible for this deep problem of consumption. And it also requires, I've totally, I've been a fan of the article by Kate on the shift model. We need to create a bottom-up mindful consumption movement. It is not only about just the minor changes. It actually requires a lot of social learning programs. We probably need to use the same method that we have used. For example, just as an example, that when did consumerism come into play? It was only the handiwork of 2 decades of concerted efforts by think tanks, marketers, and business people that we launched consumerism in a big way. So the same methods that we used to launch consumerism as a big way, we may want to reuse it to actually de-emphasize, de-market consumption. And it requires advertising and social media messages put in a different way and consumer engagement activities that really gets the consumer engaged in mindful consumption. So what are the research opportunities? First and foremost, this whole transformative consumption behavior, the literature on that, we need to really kind of consider and see how do we shift from the prevailing materialistic culture? What transformative consumption behavior perspectives have got to be used so that we change the consumption culture itself? We also need to think beyond this nudging to the tipping point. It's not a matter of just nudging the consumer. Can we tip the consumer to a behavior change? So what force is needed to tip the consumer? Unless until you tip the consumer beyond that level, you're not going to achieve what we want to achieve and what we need to achieve in a very short period of time. We've got to also rethink alternative hedonism. The construction, how do we construct an alternative hedonism? The whole current hedonism is all based on material. Can we get away from that? And as to some extent, Sandra was alluding to it, to say, can we create a living environment where you don't have to use really product, but other ways in which you can have pleasure and hedonism? Is construction, is promotion, is response, value, all in sustainable living. We got to rethink. Sustainable living is to do with the community a lot. Where we live, how we live, what material we use, a lot of things are related to that. From a consumer behavior point of view, we also need to explain paradoxes. The interesting thing about consumer is that we become sustainable in one respect and unsustainable in other. For example, we want to eat organic food, but yet we have got gas guzzling costs. So there's paradoxes, the same consumerism paradox. Can we explain that? Can we try and see how do we break those across category, paradoxes that exist? My favorite area is, of course, post-consumption behavior. One of the most challenging domains, in the past when we studied post-consumption behavior, was all about cognitive dissonance and the satisfaction. But a more behavioral aspect is to do with the end of the product life cycle. What do we do regarding its disposal? What do we do regarding recycle? A lot is happening in the labs today about upcycle, not recycle, in terms of taking the product and bringing about a new, better use of the product. What do we do regarding reuse and renewable? Renewables is not only about renewable energy, it's also to do with the renewable products. How do we kind of consume products that are more renewable? And a full cost pricing model. Why should the manufacturer get away by saying, I'm going to put a lower price to pass on the product to the consumer? Then the consumer has to bear the cost of disposal. The consumer has to bear the cost in terms of all its effects. Why can't the full cost pricing built in right from the beginning? As for example, some of these toners, etc., and companies who make printing toners, they build the cost in terms of for you to recycle and send it back to them. Let the cost the process, the system of all these waste management be borne by upfront, including it into the product? What does it look like from a research point of view, from a marketing and accounting perspective? Also, the removal of information asymmetries. I think we talked about, Kate talked about this whole intention versus behavior issue. A lot of this intention versus behavior issue is because of the fatigue that customers think in terms of processing the information. So how do we remove the information asymmetries, so that people who have the positive intention also have a positive behavior, because they have the intention, but they don't know how to evaluate what consumption to really go engage in. And to some extent, I am, even though everybody kind of promotes the idea of consumer behavior rather than the intention part of it, but I think that we cannot really ignore the attitude or the mindset that is needed to have the behavior. Mindset is very important. So research on mindset cannot be ignored only to say, I'm only going to examine the behavior of people. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities there. The entire sustainable living landscape. What's the contextualized narratives? How contextualized narratives are built, they are evaluated, etc. And also the fact that, what can marketing do to prevent disasters and catastrophes, or prepare consumers for catastrophes? We have been seeing such, for example, the earthquake in Turkey, the massive amount of the concrete that we have used to build the living landscapes are actually kind of killing people. So what do we do in order to create the alternative living landscapes and promoting it, as well as doing the disaster prevention marketing? I also think one of the biggest challenges that marketing, or even the whole economic system has created, is we have outsourced our production, calling it the unsustainable production, to mask actually our unsustainable consumption. What are we doing? The nations that consume have said, oh, I'm going to buy it and produce it somewhere else. So let somebody else deal with all the pollution problem, deal with all the toxic problem, and then I say, I'm consuming it, but I am not polluting it. Now that's a very, difficult way in which the developing countries are going to deal with it. For the developing countries, what we are doing is we are pushing in or exporting all our problems to them, and then taking the green products for ourselves. I think we need to rethink this whole idea about the distance production aspect. We all are talking about bringing it closer to production and consumption. And to a large extent, the ethics and normative ideologies have got to be aligned. There is a lot of philosophical aspect of it. In fact, one of the recent papers that Jack Sheth and I just wrote in the Journal of Macro Marketing, and one more is coming out in the Journal of Consumer Affairs, in aligning the philosophies of the Eastern and the Western side, the Dharma as a principle, which is basically normative duties, or karma, which is part of both Buddhist philosophy as well as the Hindu philosophy, etc., and eudaimonia of the Aristotle in philosophy, they all can be aligned together to create the necessary mindful consumption mindset of people. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
Okay,
not least.
Excuse me, Atul, I need to stop you.
I'm going to just say the last sentence and I'll be out of it.
Okay.
Okay. So we've got to rethink in terms of the distal goals of happiness and well-being, instead of focusing too much on the proximate goals and success metrics, all on sales and profitability. So I think that the consideration for the distal goals is very important. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking longer time. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you. Very interesting. Repeatedly hearing about this is like going back to graduate school. There's a lot of emphasis on the paradigm and rethinking the fundamental purpose of marketing. But before we get into that, I don't want to